Hey, you're listening to Stop the Scroll, a social media marketing podcast, and I'm your host, Heidi Schmidt. I'm a social media strategist and agency owner with over 15 years of marketing experiences helping businesses grow online. We'll be diving into what you need to know so that you can show up confidently online without the overwhelm. Get your notebook ready to jot down some amazing marketing gems, and let's dive into it. Welcome back to another episode of Stop the Scroll. I'm your host, Heidi Schmidt, social media strategist and agency owner, and I'm super excited about our guest that we have today, Mackenzie. She is a copywriter and coach and brand messaging mentor, which I am super jazzed to hear about because I feel like that's kind of one of the things that I need to learn about. She has a BA in professional writing and over 9 years of experience crafting copy for brands like Capital One and Teachable. That's so cool. And she is known for producing tangible results for clients of all shapes and sizes. And now she's the go-to conversion copywriter for coaches and online service providers and supports industry-leading women who aren't afraid to stand out, spice up their space, and make a real difference. Welcome, Mackenzie.
So excited to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. So why don't you kind of give us a little bit of intro to you, kind of what you do, who you work with, and talk to me a little bit about how you got into copywriting.
Yeah, for sure. So I like to explain myself when people are like, oh, you're a copywriter. If you say that in person to someone, like they don't see it written out, they're like, oh, you do the legal, like copy RIGHT is what people think. They're like, you do legal shit. I'm like, there is no, none of that. I like to explain copywriting as I write the words that sell your shit. So I offer done for you copywriting and also brand voice messaging, brand voice and messaging strategy. So all the things with your words, but I got into it because I got my degree in professional writing. I'm like, I can't do math. Okay, that's a big no. Can't do science. All right. Can't really draw. But I also did have a passion for writing. But I think I know there is such a humongous difference between writing and copywriting. So I don't like to be like, I loved writing because it really is a whole different world. But once I graduated, got my first job was in copywriting at Capital One and just kind of spiraled from there into an obsession.
So let's talk a little bit about the difference between copywriting and content writing.
Yes.
Because I feel like a lot of people kind of write content, but they're not necessarily copywriting. So then they're like, why isn't this converting? Why isn't this doing the thing that it's supposed to do? So can 100%. You tell a little bit about the difference between the two?
Yeah, absolutely. And to add another layer to just make it even more confusing for you, brand messaging is its own entity as well. I describe brand messaging as the foundational strategy beneath all of your copy and content writing. So it's the basics of who you are, how you are, what you do for your audience, how you connect with them. But then copy is what I would consider the strategic form of writing with the end goal of a conversion. So regardless of if that's a monetary transaction or if that's just getting someone to opt into your lead magnet, join your email list, there is some sort of conversion. Whereas content writing, the purpose, it really comes down to the goal between the two. The goal of content writing is more to educate and nurture, whereas copy is let's get that action done.
That makes a lot of sense. For people that come to you and they have no brand messaging or they've never really given it thought, how do you help brands kind of deep dive into that overall brand messaging?
Yeah. So when a lot of people come to me and be like, I need a website tomorrow, girl. And I'm like, honey, pause. I definitely you understand there's launches and timelines and we need a sales page and yes. But when it comes to things like your website, that is like the overall encompassing storefront for your brand. And just with anything, the brand messaging is what drives it. You can't write copy that converts if you don't know who you are, who you're talking to, how you're getting them from point A to point B, but in the very specific terms that click for them. So when someone comes to me and they're like, need a website, I'm like, all right, where's your brand messaging? I can whip that out for you, but we need, if your brand messaging strategy is already done, hand it over, we're good. If it's not, we got to do that shit first. So that's really like bridging the gap, I say there's two parts to a conversion, like two separate members of the team or whatever, like audience, your people, and then you. And then how you like bridge the gap, because I'm using my hands to explain this, like people can actually see what I'm doing. How you bridge the gap between the two is that brand messaging strategy, getting you guys on the same page so that your offer becomes a no-brainer, not only just interesting, but how do I follow through with that? So brand messaging strategy, the way I approach that with clients is starting with a motherfuck ton of research. You got to get to know your people. You got to get to know yourself, who you want to show up as, what kind of vibe you're looking for. Because if you're showing up as something that is unaligned, like I'm not trying to get all like, you got to be yourself, but like you got to be yourself, you guys, because if you don't, you attract the wrong people. And it's like, oh, well, no, I don't need to attract the right people. I'm just trying to make a sale. Yes, you do need to attract the right people if you want to work with the people who you're going to get the best results for. They're going to enjoy working with you. You're going to enjoy working with them. They're going to give you raving testimonials and tell the world about you, as opposed to someone who's like, well, this wasn't right for me. Like, can I get my money back? So building the whole ass brand, like you can make a buck without brand messaging, hella for sure. But you cannot build a whole ass brand and a sustainable business without that first.
So aside from like deep diving into your audience, and Marketing 101 says that you need to know your audience before anything. Like, what kind of questions do you actually ask to find that brand voice? Is it like what adjectives, Because and I love what you said about like touching on that authenticity, like how do you be yourself in your brand voice? Because that's a huge thing, like relatability and authenticity. But how do you actually find that brand voice?
Yes. So audience is definitely just one part to it. I break down my approach to brand messaging strategy into a few different portions. So first is getting to know your brand, who you want to be naturally, not thinking about sales or like how even you want to appear yet, but like who the fuck are you? What the fuck are we trying to do? Why the fuck are we trying to do it? And why should anybody give a fuck? Say fuck one more time. But then comes the audience and getting to know them. And then comes the development of the whole strategy as far as personality, voice, tone, brand values and brand messaging pillars and key message, all these different things that like pull it together. But definitely first, like not even just asking questions. I do start every brand messaging makeover, which is my offer for creating your brand messaging strategy, with what I call a brand breakthrough intensive, where we talk through a bunch of shit. You've already done a questionnaire. Like, yes, we're talking through things, but it's so hard sometimes, at least for me, and I know it has been for a lot of my clients, to get on a call and for me to be like, okay, who are you? And it's like, okay, well, how are you? Like, what do you do? Like, how do you do? Like you kind of just because we're so used to as business owners being so deep within it. To us, it's second nature, but it's like to an outsider, there are these little bits and pieces that are so important that we kind of just don't even notice anymore. So I do a whole content audit and content strategy as part of it, where I just creep the fuck out of you and all your emails you've sent and your Instagrams and your whatever you've written. I also do market research interviews with previous clients, and we talk about, well, what is it that stood out about this person, this coach or service provider that you worked with? Like, what was it that attracted to them in the first place? So it's just a lot of different modalities, kind of, but basically I am just getting to know you really deeply, your people really deeply, and only then can you begin to be like, okay, here's how we're going to bring the two together.
Got it. So once a client kind of has their brand voice and they kind of know this is who we want to portray ourselves online, what does it mean to actually amplify that brand voice?
Yeah, that is a little like, not woo, but like, gotta be yourself. But like, how do you do that? It's kind of looking at how you naturally show up. I like to tell people if they're like, I don't know how to find my brand voice. Like a lot of people will come to me and be like, well, I don't cuss like you do, so like I can't stand out. No, honey, like how we stand out is finding like the quirky parts of us and the weird things that people like notice or latch onto or like connect with in a different way. And then just turning up the volume on those. So even just going through a fun exercise I tell people to do is to go through like your texts with your best friend or pretend you're texting your best friend about your business and just explain to them in the most basic terms how you do what you do and who you do it for and why they should give any fucks. And even just looking at the language within that and how you're approaching those natural conversations. And then thinking, all right, how do we start to bring that language and that approach and that positioning like into my everyday marketing?
Nice. Nice. Yeah. I love how you describe it as like look through your text messages with your best friend because I feel like a lot of people don't necessarily do that. And it's funny because I have a client who, when I first started working with them, I always ask, describe your brand because I don't deep dive into branding. That's not me. And it was really funny because the CEO, in the same sentence, he's like, we want to be professional, but we also don't want to take ourselves too seriously. Like, how do you handle when brands have like kind of those opposing adjectives that they're like trying to be? Like, how do you handle those kind of like conflicting voice?
Well, what's so funny is that I don't think I've ever had someone come to me and be like, I want to be professional, buttoned up. Like everybody these days is like, I want to be professional, but like I'm trying to be a little chill, but like not too chill, but like I also want to be friendly, but like not too friendly. And it's like professionalism. My take on professionalism is that it's not a fucking thing in the online business where there is such a thing as like being a good human and getting your work done and stuff. But I see professionalism as like not a thing. I have done this for like 9 years now. I've gotten insane results for clients. I have my degree, whatever. I still cuss, like, and I'm professional as fuck. Like, what that word doesn't mean anything. So it's like how I tell them to like approach it is, well, what kind of feels do you want them? Like when they're reading this Instagram caption or your website, like what do you want their first thoughts, reactions, instincts to be? Not just the goal, like what, oh, go like opt into my whatever, but like, do you want them to laugh? Do you want them to feel seen? Like thinking of it that way, and then we can kind of reverse engineer from there rather than being like, I want to be friendly, but like I don't want to, say the word y'all because I'm not Southern. Like, you know what I mean? There's everything means something different to someone, which is why, especially when I create brand messaging Bibles for my clients, which is their brand messaging strategy, I just, put a fun word on it. I don't just say, okay, like brand voice, you are sassy, you are confident. Like we break that shit down. What I mean by confident, what I don't mean by confident, how to do it, how to not do it, examples. Because like I said, like different words mean different things to different people. And if you're trying to keep a consistent brand, regardless of who on your team is writing shit or who you're outsourcing to, and you hand this brand messaging Bible over, you can't then be like, oh yeah, I'm confident. And this person's like, oh, confidence means XYZ to me. Whereas someone else, it's something different.
I love that. I kind of want to deep dive into how do you build that brand voice across different platforms? Like how, because obviously, like on social media, people tend to want to be more relatable and it's a little more informal, hopefully, depending on the platform. But how do you kind of tailor brand messaging for all the various platforms, knowing that like the audience that they may be trying to reach could be a little bit different on different platforms because people use like Facebook different than they use LinkedIn
Right.
versus when they get to your website. Like, how do you kind of tailor it for platforms?
Yes. So granted, I'm not the best example of this because I just am like, I'm going to be who I am. But like, absolutely, like you show up on LinkedIn in most cases, like a little different than you do on Instagram. Like, well, no, to be fair, I do that as well. Like, I don't say, go fuck yourself on LinkedIn like I do on Instagram. I don't say that on Instagram either, no. But you know what I mean? Like we have different approaches to each platform, but that's your tone. So the way you show up in your brand voice is who you are at the core. It's the heart of your messaging, the heart of who you are, how you want to be, how you want to connect with people. That doesn't change. Your voice is always consistent. Well, it should be. Your tone, on the other hand, is going to vary per context. per audience, per situation. The way I like to explain this is if you write your best friend a birthday card and you're like, turn the fuck up, like 21, blah, 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 blah. And then you like write your grandma a birthday card and you're like, happy birthday, I love you so much, have the best day. It's like you have the same personality, but it's a different tone, it's a different approach towards the same message. And that's just going to be tweaked per platform. So I don't really know if I'm answering your question now that I'm like thinking about it. I'm like, I think I'm just rambling.
No, it makes sense. And I think that kind of goes back to the whole difference between copywriting versus content writing, because not every post on social media is going to be out there with the goal to convert, right? So let's dive a little bit more into like the difference between just kind of content writing versus copy that's actually out there. Like, my goal is to convert. Like, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you kind of see in the difference between like just content writing for like social media versus copywriting for social media? Like, if you're trying to like convert your audience, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, there are a lot of similarities between content writing and copywriting, like tips wise, as far as you still, with both, need somebody to be interested in what you're saying. You need to have great readability so that it's easy for them to digest and want to actually like, when you look at a caption, it's not just a block of text, like you're breaking it up into like, multiple paragraphs, using that white space, using emojis and bullets to naturally keep your eye moving down the screen. Like, there are those writing tips that are just across the board going to be important and like effective in both. But the biggest mistake I see when someone, like, the difference between the two and how people approach it is when they don't necessarily know the difference. It's like, well, it's semantics. Like, why does it matter if I know the difference between the words? It matters when you sit down to write your post, knowing what it is you want to do with it. Because I know a lot of people are like, well, I just got to get a post out today. I mean, I've been there. I'm like, what am I doing today? I don't know, but I haven't showed up on Instagram in 3 weeks. So like, let me write something. But every word you write, every paragraph, every sentence, like, should all be tailored towards that one goal. So this is also how we cut the fluff, right? Like, I tell people, because we're not just writing to write. That's like, I mean, I don't know if anybody watches like Vanderpump Rules, but I feel like Jax sometimes just talks to talk to fill the space. It's like, no one wants that unless you're me watching Vanderpump Rules. But anyways, so looking at every word, is it getting me closer to my goal, which is to get somebody to the next sentence, which is to get somebody to the next sentence and paragraph, to get them to that call to action. So going in to each caption, each email, each web page, and each paragraph within all of those things, knowing what the goal is how, it's definitely the first step, but it's how you distinguish, whether you're writing copy or you're writing content, and then actually achieving the goals at the base of those.
Got it. So kind of going on that nature, what are some of the most common mistakes that you see in, I'm going to say copy in general, but more like specifically like website copy or email copy? Like, talk about some of those mistakes and like, how do you coach your clients to be like, stop doing this shit? Like, it's not working.
Yeah. Well, the biggest mistake I see, it's like a tie between readability. So like I was saying, breaking things into smaller paragraphs, using white space, bullets, bolding. We want to keep the eye naturally moving, because if someone's not interested, Lord knows they're not going to fucking keep reading. We are being thrown messages all day, every fucking day. The difference is something going to be specific enough to you to immediately capture your attention, and then continue to be specific enough to you and like fluff free enough that it keeps your attention and gets you to the call to action. So I would say the biggest mistake is a tie between just not thinking about the readability and how the formatting of your copy is. It's like, yeah, that's like not a copywriting tip, but it is, because no one's going to read your shit and convert if they see just a chunk of text in an email. Like, I would rather eat my toenails. I don't know why that was the first thing that came to mind, but it's like, we don't have time. We've got to make it relevant. We've got to make it interesting. We've got to make it appealing. And that starts with looking at something and being like, oh yeah, I can skim that, because we are all skimmers first. People are like, nobody reads anymore. Lies. People do, but they skim first. So we got to write for skimmers. And then I would say the second thing is just not knowing the so what and the why should anybody give a fuck. Like, I love to talk about copywriting all day. I also love to talk about my cats like all day. If I could sit here and we could have a whole podcast episode about my cats, I would. But like, what's this? Like, why do people give any fucks? Like, it's the same thing with your business. Like, you're writing, you're telling a story, you're sharing. Yeah, but why should people give a fuck? Because at the end of the day, it's not about us at all. It's about our reader. We're all selfish, like, creatures. Like, we want to know how it relates to us specifically, why we specifically should give any fucks. And that's the only way we're going to invest our time and energy into actually reading it and then taking the next step.
And that's where I feel like a lot of, you see all these Instagram coaches out there and they're all like, here are 20 hooks to get people to stop the scroll. Like, it's all about like stopping the scroll, literally, on social media. Like, how do you get the attention? How do you get the engagement? How do you get them to read the caption? Like, not just like it and scroll past, but like, I feel like, I don't want to call it the hook economy, but like everyone's so hyper focused on hooks.
Yeah. Everyone's like, how to get attention, how to get vulnerability pimps, like all these different things. That's what I call people when they're like, vulnerability alert. And then they tell some really boring story. It's like, what? Like, it is important to get people's attention, but it is equally as important to hold it and to be presenting a message that makes a difference for your brand and your people.
Do you have clients? And I have to ask you this because I feel like I was coached on this way back in my early days as a marketer. I had a boss who was big on the WIFM, the like, what's in it for me? And coaching me like, it's not about us. And now I tell my clients this, like, it's not about you. How do you coach your clients that like just want to talk about themselves and they can't seem to grasp like it's not about you? It's about what you do for your clients. And this is kind of an overall marketing thing, but how do you tie that into like brand messaging? Because I feel like it's one of those things that like so many people kind of neglect. Like, it's not about you, it's about what you offer, but it's also about like how you make your audience feel and how you help them.
Yeah, especially because a big part of, like I said, my approach towards brand messaging strategy first is like getting to the heart of who you are and how you are. Like, who the fuck are you? Second part is your audience. So it's like, how do you balance both in your copy, and how do you not just focus on because you want to show up as yourself and you want to accomplish your goals, but like, that's not the only thing going on here. Like, there's a second party involved in all of that, and it's your audience. So I say, like, I haven't had a ton of clients who have like struggled with this specifically, but if they were, I would say, write whatever the fuck you want for that caption, tell that story, give that anecdote, tell us about all your credentials and shit, brain dump it, right? Tell us what you want to tell us. But then before you post it, obviously, go back and think for each part of it, well, why is my reader giving any fucks? Why should they care that I got my degree in technical and professional writing? Why should they give any fucks that I have 2 cats and a dog? Like, and if in the moment you're like, well, they don't, like, it could be relatability reasons. Like, I talk about my cats and dog, like, that makes me human. But at the end of the day, it's got to have something that is worth sharing. Otherwise, you're talking into a void anyways, because no one's going to read it regardless.
Yeah. It's funny because you talk about your cats and I'm like, oh, I miss my cat.
Where's your cat?
Our cat had brain cancer, so we put her down in April.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
She was old. She had a very good life. But even as a social media strategist, like, I talk about those things, and not just because ultimately, like, we know that people work with those that they know, like, and trust. And I feel like the relatability is kind of like getting people to know you so that they like you and they relate to you. But yeah, ultimately, like, I feel like a lot of us who aren't experts in copy, like, we tend to forget that, like, why does anyone give a shit?
I think there's like a really, not a fine line, it's a pretty thick line of like, you need to have a goal for what you're writing. Yes. It needs to relate to your audience. Yes. But at the end of the day, especially with personal brands, like you're a human fucking being. People relate to human fucking beings. And if I am just showing up on stories and like sharing an embarrassing, like Instagram stories and sharing an embarrassing story or something, like I'll do that. I'll do whatever I feel called to in the moment. And that maybe at the moment is like, well, what's the goal? Like, I don't necessarily approach it that way with things as if it's a sales page, that's another thing. But with content, you can show up and share whatever the fuck you want, whatever makes you feel good. At the end of the day, your audience can tell what feels forced and what's not. So I'm always like, do what feels good. It's a shitty like tip. It's like, well, I want to accomplish. Yes, but people can tell if you're going into Instagram or LinkedIn, like only with that, I want to accomplish XYZ. I want this for me rather than I want to build connections and get to know people and then sell. Does that make any sense?
It does. It does. Absolutely, it does. We kind of talked about some of those mistakes that, you see in copy. I want to talk a little bit more about like email copy because I feel like that's one of those big conversion channels for people. And what are some tips or recommendations? Like if there's a big difference between like your average newsletter versus an email that's like specifically there to convert, like, hey, I'm promoting X service. What kind of strategies or recommendations do you have for someone who's like, well, I'm just going to throw this email out to the void? And I say, for someone, and I'm mostly meaning me because most of the time I pull emails out of my butthole and I'm just like, let's see what I get from this. But if someone's actually like, I want to be a little more strategic with my copy, and what do you kind of recommend? Because there has to be also like, I feel like there has to be a nice balance between like, okay, we're going to copyright and we're going to try to always be selling.
That's what I was going to say is my first tip is look at your content calendar and map out the actual emails strategically. So it's not just sales one after the other. There's the 3-to-1 rule, which is for every one sales email you send, you should have 3 nurture emails prior. So even if you're launching and you're like, well, I like open card is this week. Like, I don't want to randomly send 3 nurtures. And then no, you can do like card is open 7 days, 7 days worth of emails, sales emails in a row, but like you've got to lead into that, obviously with your pre-launch, your warm-up phase with a bunch of nurture shit. So we definitely don't want to like only email our audience when we're trying to sell shit, because I like to relate it. And this is why I recommend like, and just push so hard that people have welcome sequences instead of just like a lead magnet and opt-in that leads to the void. And then randomly they get a sales email when you're ready for them. It's like, that feels like you just had a really great date with Chad from Tinder. And you're like, oh my God, Chad is so sweet. I love Chad. Like, Chad was great. Like, I had a really great date. And then Chad doesn't text you. And you're like, all right, whatever. It's been a day. Like, he's playing it cool. It's fine. And you're like, well, now it's been 2 days. And then Chad is not texting you for months. And suddenly he's like, you up? And he's sending the 2 a.m. text and he's like, come over for the D. And you're like, what the fuck? Like, I feel used. That's how your people on your email list feel. If you are just like giving them the freebie and you're like, oh, she's not like, I love this value. And then it's like, they don't hear from you. And then you're like, buy my shit. So it's kind of the same thing with launches and sales emails in general, is you've got to warm them up. Like, get us in the mood. Like, give us a little tea, like warm me up, like get me feeling good before you try to take my pants off.
This is a great little segue because I feel terrible with welcome sequences. I've done them before, but what do you recommend to have? Like, how long should a welcome sequence be? What goes in there? Like, because obviously you're nurturing. You're not just like, welcome to my list. Buy the shit.
Right. Yeah. So I have a standard like sequence that I recommend. And I call it my ride or die welcome sequence templates, like plug and play templates for this. But to start, before you even write any part of your welcome sequence, and this is such a boring tip, but you got to know your goal. You got to know what you're pitching at the end. So even if you're a brand new business and you're like, well, I'm not ready to sell my offers yet, get them on your Instagram list, like, or get them on your Instagram, like get them to follow you, connect with you further, read your blog, like check out your YouTube, something, but we need to give them a pitch at the end and we have to know what that is before we start writing the emails that lead to it. So if I'm pitching my high ticket done for you copywriting service, I'm going to include probably more emails than if I'm like, go follow me on Instagram. Or like, and then the content of those emails is going to be different too, because I'm warming them up for what I'm eventually getting to. But it all starts with knowing, like, well, what am I doing here in the first place? What am I trying to accomplish before I write a single word of copy?
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. How often would you recommend updating your welcome sequence? And do you segment it out like based on how people come onto your list? Because if you have multiple freebies or multiple services that people might be interested in.
I mean, look, first of all, let me put this out here. I'm not trying to lie to anybody. I fucking hate my own, like writing my own emails. I do it, but it's like if I can go XYZ date, like years without updating my welcome sequence, like, I'm not gonna like, I just don't, for my own brand, don't love doing it. In a perfect world, for each freebie, you would have, when you create it, a specific goal for, like, okay, I have a website copy checklist. Like, I want this to lead to somebody to buy my website templates. So your nurture sequence would be tailored to that and then pitch the website template. So like in a perfect world, yeah, every freebie would have a different nurture sequence and it would lead to a specific goal, but we're only human. Like if you only have one and it leads to the same call to action, like do it to it. It's better than not saying anything at all. Like messy action's the way to go.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I don't remember the last time that I updated my welcome sequence, but
it's forever on my to-do list because I honestly I have a few nurture sequences, welcome sequences for different things, but like my core welcome sequence, I haven't updated it in a long time. And I swear every week when I'm like sitting down at my desk and like whipping out my piece of paper and my pretty gel pen, I'm like, what do I need to do this week? I swear every week I'm like, I should update my welcome sequence, but here we are years later and it's just not happening.
amazing. Amazing. I don't think I have any other questions, but is there any like last nuggets of information that you would recommend to like a small business owner who's like, I need to get my copy together. Like what I'm throwing out there isn't working. Like, what do you recommend if they're just like, shit's not working, nothing's converting, I'm not getting the leads that I want? Like what kind of your words of wisdom?
I would say take a bird's eye view at everything you have put out. What worked the best? What didn't work? What are the differences between them? And then the things that did seem to work, like how can I lean more into that? I mean, like your analytics and seeing how shit that you've already written performed is going to help you immensely moving forward. And it's like also the easiest way to just improve your copy is by looking at, oh, okay, like let me lean more into this. Copy is forever like a trial and error. You are never gonna write something that you're like, well, that's it. I'm converting at XYZ% and I don't want to increase it. No, like we're going to write a sales page or write an email sequence or something and look at the conversions, look at the data. How can we improve it? How can we optimize and keep improving the conversions? And also your audience is evolving as you're evolving as a brand. So things will always be changing. Just I'd say my biggest piece of advice is don't let it get too serious to where you're overthinking and then not putting anything out. Because it's so easy with copy to be like, to get in your own head. And does it sound like me? Is it going to convert? Like, just put it out there and see what happens. At the end of the day, like you learn something from it. You look at your data and you learn something and the next thing you write is better. So better something than nothing.
I love that. Tell me about your offer and how people can get in touch with you.
Yeah. So hit me up on Instagram. That's where I hang out because I am not a Facebook girly. Oh, I also have a YouTube channel that's super fun. If you're interested in actually working together, I have a brand messaging makeover offer where I develop your whole ass brand messaging strategy, your content strategy, all the fun things we talked about. But I also offer done for you copy via VIP weeks. So hit me up. Let's chitty chat, make sure we're a good fit, and see where it goes.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so, so much for chatting with me. This was amazing and lovely. And I look forward to staying connected, and definitely go follow Mackenzie. She's hilarious and and absolutely brilliant. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And stay tuned next week for another great episode of Stop the Scroll with helpful marketing strategies to help you show up authentically and relatable.